Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our PatternFly community meeting. We host these meetings monthly and cover all things pertinent to the PatternFly community meeting at large. We cover topics that our community members are working on outside of the PatternFly team, and then also we cover new features and enhancements that we're working on to make live on the website. So we'll go ahead and get started. First, we're going to cover new features and enhancements that are now live on our website. Zack, Michael, Christie, Katie, and Titani are here from the PatternFly team to cover those. And then I'll pass it off to Harald for his project that he is debuting here with us today, which is his job implementation of PatternFly 4 in the library he has built that you could, in fact, find very helpful for your own project. And then we'll cover what we're working on next. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So to start us off, Zack, would you like to go over some patternfly.org updates?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Can you all see my screen? Hold on, let's make sure. Can we see it?
Yep. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. So I'm just gonna go over a few things that we've done to the site real fast. So the first is we added a nice table of contents here under the documentation section for our release notes. So you can see our past 6 releases quickly, thanks to Evan for this. Something else that you have probably noticed, but maybe not yet, is that we added these code sandbox buttons. So for different components, you can always click on the code sandbox button to be brought to a new page where you can play around with the example. And we're aware of some issues for these, like sometimes it'll load forever here, but many of them work and can be useful to you devs. So, here I could play around with our example and share this link, whereas on the site here, this is just kind of local to me and can't be shared. And the last thing is we have full screen page examples now for every single example. So if you click on that, we, for both React and Core, have examples. And that's the part of the latest round of site updates. Been doing some other stuff too, but those are big ones, exciting ones. That's all.
Great, thank you, Zack. And Michael's going to cover Monospace font stack.
Hey, let me share my screen. Okay, yeah, this should be quick. This we just have a Monospace font stack now that's for use with the new Red Hat font. So before this, we only introduced the Red Hat fonts for regular text and headings. And if you used the Monospace font stack in your application, you would have gotten the Overpass Mono stack that was intended for use with Overpass. And so now we have introduced a new stack that's for use with the Red Hat font. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So the old stack was based off of Overpass Mono with a bunch of fallbacks, and then now the new font stack for use with the Red Hat font is Liberation Mono. And I put together a quick demo here that I had up a second ago. And this just illustrates the variable that you use in your application if you want to use Monospace. We don't currently use Monospace in any of our built-in components, but it's there for your application's use if you need it. And if by default, if you're just using Overpass and you haven't opted into the new Red Hat font in your application by applying PFM Red Hat font to your application, you will get Overpass as your default font, and this is the Overpass Monospace font. But if you have opted in with PFM Red Hat font, then this variable will resolve to the Liberation Mono stack, and then that's what this font stack looks like right here. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Michael. Christie's going to cover the divider component.
Thanks, Rachel. So a while back, I added the divider component in React, and it has a few variations. So it has the default variation that uses a horizontal rule, and then there's a variation that sits between list items, and then there's a variation that uses a div. And so once this divider component becomes joins like the regular components, we'll update the components that use a divider or a separator to use this divider component. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Christy. Katie is going to cover the bulk select table demo and the filterable table demo.
Yep, got a couple here. So let me quickly share my screen. All right, so first I'll cover the bulk select table demo. So these next two demos are for table, kind of meant to give more advanced usage cases for when you want to have one of our table component and actually combine it with, in this case, a toolbar component. And for this specific use case, it's to basically change the control for selection for when you want to do a bunch of selections at once. So the table on its own normally has a little checkbox in the top header next to title and body that would do all or nothing just for that page if it was paginated. So the way this bulk select divides it up is now there's a drop down with our split checkbox drop down where you can actually select a single page and maybe go to like the end, select another page, and then it says you have 40 selected across all of the pages. You could also select everything or deselect and do the same all or nothing with the checkbox at the top, which is what it used to look like, but now you have some more fine control that you can customize for selections. And that about covers bulk selects. The next table demo is for filtering. And I think at some point these table demos might all but collapse together into a single toolbar, but for now they're separate. And this table, using some just dummy data here, shows off the data toolbar component, which is experimental, so this is subject to change still at this point, and will actually filter the table based on several of these different categories. So you can filter it by Raleigh, and then maybe say I want only stopped people or stopped nodes. And if you select more than one per category, it's an OR, so you can see it just keeps adding more. And then if no results are found, you get an empty state where you can also clear all the filters from both. That about covers this node, which I got that wrong, CZ. So that's about it for the filterable table. And then lastly, I'm going to cover a new variant for our dropdown. So in the bulk select table, you saw the split button with the third state with a checkbox where you can control that. But we wanted to also have a variant where maybe you didn't want a checkbox, you just wanted another customized action. So you can see these two examples of split button action where the toggle will still control a dropdown, but you can actually click on the other element and have your own custom event handler for that action. And the dropdown also works as normal. Part of this is also support to add icons in the dropdown as well. So both of these are, that covers it for me.
Great, thanks, Katie. Titani is going to cover the accordion update and an update to your text area.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yep.
can.
All right, great. So we made an enhancement to the accordion component. We added the ability to remove the box shadow. So we added a prop called no box shadow. And when that is applied, you'll notice that the box shadow is removed. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the next enhancement I want to share is with the text area component. Previously, you were only able to resize both the horizontal and vertical axis at the same time. And we added a prop called resize orientation. So now you have the ability to resize just the horizontal, just the vertical axis, and the default behavior remains the same as it was before, where it resizes both the horizontal and vertical axis. So here the prop is set to resize just the vertical axis. So when I resize, it just resizes it vertically. And here is set to resize horizontal. We'll just resize horizontally. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Titani. And now I'll pass it off to Harald to talk a little bit more about his Java implementation of PatternFly 4 and the work he's been doing there.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So let me share my screen. Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to introduce this little side project which I set up. So basically, it's as you said, it's a Java implementation of PatternFly 4. It is based on the core PatternFly components, so the HTML and CSS part of PatternFly, which I basically consume. And so I consume the CSS styles, and I use libraries, namely GWT. So it's backed by GWT and by a library called Elementor, which simplifies the setup of the DOM trees. And the reason for this little side project is basically that I would like to have a foundation for the next major HAL version. Now, for those of you who don't know what HAL is, it's the management console of the Wildfly application server, which I'm the component lead of HAL actually. So right now HAL is a rich internet application which is built by GWT. So it's written in Java, transpiled to JavaScript using GWT, and it's using PatternFly 3 at the moment. So when I would like to upgrade to PatternFly 4 in the next major version, and that is actually the reason why I set up this PatternFly Java effort. So I would like to have an implementation of Java, because the HAL code base is a pretty large code base which is written in Java. So I need something which gives me the opportunity to use PatternFly 4, but at the same time use Java as a programming language. So yeah, let's take a look at the code. So right now it's on GitHub. There are two repositories actually right now. The first one is the PatternFly Java repository, which contains the components, or some of the components at the moment written in Java. So if we take a look at some of the source code, some of the classes, you can see there are some components right now in here, which is a small part of the components available in PatternFly 4, but the list is growing. We will see the code and how this works in a moment. Just want to switch over to the second repository, and that's the showcase. That's for me, that serves two purposes. One purpose is to have a showcase to see how the components work and whether they work or not, and then at the same time to have a good feedback how the API looks like and how the API behaves. So let's jump into the showcase. And that's something which is hosted on GitHub right now, and it's based on the original PatternFly 4 website. So there's a getting started section and a contribute section, but that doesn't contain much content right now. So everything is really heavily work in progress, but the main stuff lives under documentation here. And this is again based on the PatternFly 4 website. And here you can see the list of components I've implemented so far, and then there's a demo which I show to you in a minute. But first, let's take a look at some of the components and see how they how the code actually looks like. So, for instance, if you want to use alerts, you can see, let's take a look at the inline outlets for instance. You can flip here on the button and see how the actual Java code looks like. So the basic idea of PatternFly Java is to have a really simple API to get started fast. And most of the time you are using static factory methods to create the components. I'd like to keep it as simple as possible. So the alert is a relatively simple component. You give a title and then you have methods to modify the look and feel, like in this case you call the inline method to get an inline alert. If we have kind of an original other alert, you can add descriptions, you can add content, can add links, and this is how you set up simple components like alerts. To give another example, we can take a look at the card component, which is a good example how to see what it takes to compose a component and adding other components to it. So for instance, in this example, you can see you basically again have a factory method to create the component, and then you call add methods to add a header, to add a head, an image, to add something like a dropdown or a checkbox, to have a body and to have a footer. So that's the basic idea behind the components and the API. And next, I would like to show you a more complex example. And this is a little demo which uses multiple components from PatternFly. It uses the data toolbar, it uses filters, sort options, and it uses these three more complex components like the card view, the data table, and the data list. And the basic idea behind this example is that the data itself is stored in a so-called data provider. So this data provider holds the actual data, in this case the users. It holds information about the filter, the pagination, and the sort order. So, and to show it how it works, so I can select here multiple users, and this is reflected in the other component as well. So if I flip over to the data list or to the data table, you can see the selection remains the same. And for instance, if I choose a sort order like last name, this should be reflected here in the header of the data table as well. So I can switch between the different components, and because all of these components use the same data provider, it's quite easily to flip between them. The same goes for the pagination and the range of items you want to show. And the filtering should work the same way. So in this case, the filtering is a filter over the username, the first name and the last name, and then black is the username of these users. The filtering works across the different components. So for those of you who want to see what the code of this more complex example looks like, this is all on GitHub, so you can take a look, and I just want to show you the basic building blocks of this little demo. So as I already told, there's a data provider which is responsible for holding the user data, the different users. Then we have a toolbar which contains things like the bike select, the sort options, and then the group of buttons to switch between the different components. Then we have a card view, which is backed by the data provider and which uses so-called display to display the users in a card. The same goes for the data list, which again uses the data provider and display to show each user in a list item in that case. And finally, the data table, which again uses the data provider and has a number of columns which we add using this API here. And then the last thing to do is just to say that the data provider now knows about the different displays. So the data provider has several displays, and that is the toolbar, the card view, the list view, and the data table. And the rest is finally setting up the overall user interface, the overall page, like adding sections and contents, titles, and paragraphs, and finally adding an empty div which holds the currently visible component. And last thing which I can show you is these displays we are using to show one user in a card. In that case, for the display which is used by the card view, and this callback we're using here receives the card, the user, the data provider, and the current user which we want to show. And then we can use the API to add headers, to add actions, or to add a dropdown, to add the photos of the user, the address, and things like that. So yeah, basically that's all I have at the moment. So as I said, it's really work in progress. I'm adding more components over time, and I hope these lists will grow. And I try to keep track of the new stuff which is added to PatternFly, and try to add it to my component or to this PatternFly Java version. And I hope this little effort is interesting for some guys who also want to use GWT or Java when building PatternFly applications. And would love to get some feedback, and if you have any questions, feel free to ping me. And yeah, that's all from my side. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, truly an amazing project, and thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, again, we really encourage you to reach out to Harald to learn more and become part of this work.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so I should be sharing my screen again. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're working on next. We're going to make enhancements to pagination, application launcher, link button, options menu, and list. We're also working on a number of infrastructure issues and bugs, so I really encourage you to check out our current milestone, which I've linked in this slide, and the slide links are in the chat. So go ahead and take a look at what we're up to for this current milestone, which will wrap up sometime in late December. And that's it for today. I'd like to hand it off to all of you and see if you have any questions about anything our presenters have shared today. All right. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. I'll talk with you next month. Thanks. Bye.